So yeah, my name's ANDRICO KAROULLA, and the talk is SSR with Next.JS. This is my first time at a JS Monthly, and I thought a good icebreaker is to just kind of kick off with a live demo. So hopefully if it all goes right, you're going to think I'm a code ninja, but realistically, this is what's going to happen. So what I want to show you guys is just how easy it is to set up a Next.js project, give you guys a bit of context on what I'm talking about before I kind of delve into some of its features. So all you have to do when kicking off a Next.js project is installing 3 dependencies, Next, React, and React DOM. And Next has some scripts that you can use, like a dev script, a build script, and a production script. But for the purposes of the talk, we're just going to be using the dev script. So what we'll do, I want to just run up my, my dev server, and it's going to throw an error straight away, because what we need in a Next.js project is a pages directory. And the pages directory is kind of the only thing that Next.js is opinionated on. It kind of helps with your, it helps with the server-side rendering, and it helps with the routing as well. So I'm just going to make a couple of pages in here. We're going to do an index page, an accounts page, and say we're an e-commerce site. We're going to have some t-shirts in a directory here, and then we're just going to have a t-shirt file in here. Cool, and you'll see why I nested things in that directory briefly. So a little nifty feature with Next is that it assumes that you're going to be using React because it's built on top of React, so you don't need to import React every single time, saving a little bit of boilerplate. So if we just kick off with a little div here, and is that right? Yep. For now, we'll just do an h1 tag. This one's going to be called index. And now if we run our dev environment again, it should give us the all clear. Cool. So if I go localhost 3000, straight away we're just going to see index. Hopefully, yep, that's our index page, and we can do our routing accounts. It's based on the name that we gave it. And then we can do kind of longer, what do I call it, t-shirts. And I can give it a, what is it called? Just like pass it down like a URL parameter, I guess. Not really, but. So yeah, our directory was t-shirts, and the file inside of it was t-shirt. And that's just like a little nifty feature in there. And I'm going to create a components directory. And in here, I'm going to make a button. And this is just going to be one of Next.js's built-in functions, next.link, which just lets us kind of link between pages. So again, just going to export default a little div. Actually, not a div, a link. And it's going to take 2 properties. Cool. So the title is going to be props.name, and we're going to pass in an href props.location. And we're exporting that, and we're going to... Oh, sorry, man. Let me just go over that again then for you. Is that better? Cool. So yeah, just imported link. Just returned a link element, and inside of here, I'm going to be importing that from our component, button, and cool. Button, we're going to pass in location, and this one is going to be our accounts. And the name is going to be called account. And let's just copy this over to my accounts page. Oh. And import that at the top too. So import button from components and button. Sweet. So hot reloading has done its job, hopefully. And if I go back to my home page, I've got an account that links nicely backwards and forwards. Oh, I gave it the wrong name. Cool. Sweet. And just quickly, before I move on, Next.js has styled JSX built in out of the box, which is a great which is a great CSS tool, similar to that of style components, where you just kind of have styles that are scoped to that component. So if I want to have an F1 with a size of, I don't know, 30 pixels, that would work, hopefully. Am I on accounts? And that didn't work, but let's just pretend it did so I can move on. Cool. So, Next.js. It's really easy to set up. I'm a big fan of it. The guys at Zeit, they are an excellent company that I'm not affiliated with. I was asked last time actually if I was affiliated with Zeit because I just love Next.js so much. But no, I'm not. They do great products like Star.jsx, they even do now, if you guys have used that before, really easy deployment to web. That also works really nicely with Next.js. But yeah, like some of its great features out of the box are transpiling and bundling, as you guys saw. It kind of had hot code reloading, kind of working really nicely. It's easy to kind of serve static files and your styles with that too. Another nice little thing is kind of graceful error handling. If I was to have made an error, which I could probably do now quickly for you guys. For instance, if I kind of left this out, then it would probably tell me here what I've done wrong, and that's really nice. So let's just clear my dev server and get back on here. Cool, so that's a brief introduction on Next.js. So about me, my name's Andrico. Here's a picture of me playing the accordion. Haven't been in web development for too long. Up until about 2 years ago, I worked in the family business of fish and chips. If anyone's from Southeast London, Brockley, then you're familiar with our family shop, Brockley's Rock, which have won quite a few awards for best chips in London. So if you're around in the area, feel free to pop down. But then, yeah, I kind of got into full stack web development and got my first job at Win Technologies, where I kind of worked until recently, and currently work at Trint. And I'm with a couple of guys from Trint there, offering their support. But just like a quick brief on what Trint is. We are a kind of an automated transcript service that kind of like utilizes AI to generate transcripts in minutes. If you pass in an audio file, we can handle like a few different English accents and use like 12 European languages. So it's a really fun product and I'm enjoying working with them. But aside from that, like some of my interests are music, as you saw from the accordion. So if you guys want to hit me up on Twitter, then talk code with me, talk music, I'd absolutely love it. And you can also find me on Instagram. Both of my handles are ANDRICO KAROULLA. Cool, so this is the meat of the talk. What is SSR? So SSR is server-side rendering. For those of you that are unaware, it's where your HTML page is built on the server side, which means instead of making loads of requests every time you need an asset, the server retrieves all those assets all in one go and then sends you back a fully built page. With everything kind of all nice and bundled for you. So like a little nice analogy is thinking of food shopping. If you guys, client-side rendering would be like going to the shop every single time you need a meal. You're making that journey to the shop, getting like your lunch, your Sainsbury's meal deal, and then going back home. And you're doing that 3 times a day for every single meal. Whereas server-side rendering, you're making one journey to the shop, doing your whole week's shopping, and then come back. The time to first byte in both instances is a little longer for server-side rendering and your weekly feed shop, but you won't have to keep making additional requests to the server or the shop doing that. So yeah, like I said, time to first byte is longer by using server-side rendering. So here is a much nicer kind of explanation on that. So server-side rendering at the top, you're making a single request and everything gets built on your server and it sends a response. The thicker arrow kind of indicates that there's more data involved with that. And then with client-side rendering, you're making a request, getting back your bare bones index file, and then every time you need something else, it just kind of like goes backwards and forwards. If you've got loads of like images on your page and you can only do like a maximum of 4 requests on HTTP 1, then that might kind of cause a performance issue down the line. So here is like another visual representation of client-side rendering. So you click on a modal that has a bunch of images and you get lots of pop-in. And even though it loads a little quicker than it might do on server-side rendering, it doesn't look great and the kind of perceived loading might feel a little slower. Whereas server-side rendering, if you click your About page, the initial load might be a little longer, but because everything comes back all kind of rendered for you, then it kind of displays all at once. So what is SSR good for? SEO is a good instance. Perceived loading of the website. And it kind of, even outside of Next.js, it's really easy to kind of integrate with Angular 5 and React 16 nowadays. So even if you're interested in SSR but don't want to use Next.js, you can go about kind of utilizing it quite easily now. There are a couple of caveats with using SSR. First one being is that there is a longer initial load. Time to first byte is a little longer because you're getting back more data and the server has to take a little longer building it. And there's also more work on the server side. If you have a large website or you're using kind of AWS or Azure for scaling, more work means you're spending more money. So that could kind of like deter you from using SSR. But I'm going to like give a couple of solutions as a way to kind of reduce that impact. So here is the SSR with Next.js. So let's kind of get onto it. So SSR works out of the box. You don't really need to do anything. There's no config involved. How it works is that the pages directory I showed you earlier, on the first load of the website, Next.js indexes it. So that means even though there's SSR on the first load of the page, it uses client-side rendering on the subsequent loads. So the first load will feel a little longer, but because everything's already kind of indexed in your web app, everything can kind of like be easily accessible from your web app on the client side. So code splitting, another really good feature that Next has. The great thing about it is that it will only bundle the code that you use in your particular component. So if you haven't imported Redux in your page, you're not going to get Redux bundled with your page. This is a great way of kind of shaving little precious kilobytes rather, of your bundle size. Could make your site feel a little faster because it only loads the necessary code for each page. And another thing is control resource prioritization. And that is where the browser can kind of realize what is the most important thing to download first. If you've got blocking JS or you've got blocking CSS, your browser will know to download that first so that the rest of the site can start loading. Cool. Prefetching, another great feature. It downloads the JavaScript bundle before the user actually even navigates to that page. You add that attribute into your link element that I showed you guys earlier. And what this does is that it doesn't need to inject the code before you load when switching page, which means get initial props, which is a method I'll show you guys in a little bit, gets run on the client side and not the server side. And this is just a way for Next.js to kind of populate the props before the site loads. And this is a nice little ahead of time feature, well, kind of makes your website feel more like a native app because of this ahead of time download feature. And this kind of solves the TTFB problem, or kind of at least reduces it. So here's a live demo of that in action. So we're going here, and let me just kick off my dev server again. Cool. Hopefully, let me just. Cool. So again, I'm only using three packages: React, Next, and React DOM. But I'm also using isomorphic unfetch just for this fetch method here. But what's going on here? This is that get initial props method that I was telling you about earlier. So that would normally run on the server side, gets all the initial props and then sends it back to you and then populates the page. Whereas if we use this prefetch, attribute in link, as soon as you load the site, you kind of get the JavaScript bundle downloaded so that you don't need to go back to the server to run this method. There are a few other ways you can call prefetch imperatively using the router, which Next also kind of has for you to use. So let me just kind of show you how that works. So let's, cool, so behind the scenes, we kind of click this create React app one, and oh, I think my internet's not working because that would normally have gotten some data from GitHub. So that's not very good. But what we can see is that if I hover over this how about next, we can see that this method, router.prefetch, ran because I'm console logging out prefetching home. So that JavaScript bundle would load before I even click this how about next, and then it would load it and kind of populate the props kind of in the client side. And my internet's working now as well. Cool. So that was a brief demo on that. So another one of Next.js's features is Ssr caching. What Ssr caching is, it kind of solves that issue of the kind of increased server load. So like I mentioned earlier, server-side rendering can use a lot of your server power. Again, that could cost you money down the line if you're using Azure. So what we can do is every time we render a page from the server side, we can cache that. And there are a couple of great plugins that work nicely with Next that you can use caching with. LRU cache is one of them. LRU stands for least recently used resource, and it's a great way of just kind of storing your most recently used pages and just kind of like pushing out the ones that aren't getting used, since they're not being used. So another really quick demo of this in action. So let me make sure I've just cancelled that. Sweet, and I'll run my dev server too. Oh, I think I've got the wrong one. Here we are. Cool. So we've got this index page, this server page, and all it does is just kind of creates up an Express server, uses LRU cache, and uses Next. So this kind of stuff is just kicking off your server like normal. This is how you kind of bootstrap Next into your app from the server side. You pass in the home directory, and you also pass in which environment you're on, dev, production, or other. So then we've got this Ssr cache where we kind of initialize our cache objects. We pass in the options. We want to have 100. We want to have a maximum of 100 pages stored in this cache, and we want them to last about an hour. And then we just run everything else like a normal Express server. So we get our index page, and instead of sending back the index page, we use this rendering cache method, which I've written down here. So we create a cache key, and what we do is every time we look for a page, we see if the page is stored in the cache. If it is, we console log a message, cache hit, and then send back the correct page. Otherwise, if it's not in there, we just add the key to the cache, say that the cache was missed, and then just render that page like we normally would in Express. So this is it in action. So I'll load my page, and let's go to the blog first. And if we go here, because it was the first time we went into that page, it says that the cache was missed. So if I go back and load it again, because it's been stored in the cache, it hit the cache. And then, if it was a kind of a more bloated site, you would notice a performance difference. So again, if I go to this other blog post, it didn't go inside, it didn't hit the cache because it doesn't exist in the cache yet. And one more time, because it's stored there now, we can see it. It's been hit. Cool. And finally, just on kind of Next feature set, Zeit are really good at kind of supporting their platforms, not just Next, but kind of every other product that they have. And then when React 16 came out, there were, it was React Fiber. There were loads of performance increases. Next kind of released an update to make Zeit released an update to make Next compatible with React 16 almost immediately. And that counts for a lot when I look for kind of like a plugin or a framework to use, is how well it is being maintained. So recently Next released their 5th version. I've done this talk once before at React Meetup, and one of the questions I got was, what was my least favorite aspect of Next.js? And it was their lack of Sass support. Previously, Star.jsx and a few other kind of inline solutions were kind of the easiest way to go. If you wanted to use Sass in your project, you'd have to kind of bend over backwards, kind of configure your Webpack quite a bit and your Next config file. Whereas now they kind of make it really, really, really easy to just import a Sass plugin, and it kind of works from there. Another one, just general improvements to their Webpack. But a cool thing that I was really interested in is their kind of implementing zones into a product now. And it is quite a, it's worth a talk in its own, but really briefly, if you use a microservice architecture and you've got 3 or 4 different sites that all use Next.js, you can kind of connect them up using Next zones to kind of use that prefetching and kind of the Ssr that Next kind of has for you to use between them. So it kind of feels like they're all connected, even though they're completely separate websites. So that is something I'm going to be using in the future, hopefully. So this actually kind of does come towards, this is now the end of my talk. It kind of went by a lot quicker than I expected it to. But yeah, like some final words, I do really like Next.js. I find it easy to use. I haven't used it in a production level, even though Zeit do use it on their main website and they say it scales really well, but I haven't done that personally myself. The examples online are incredible. They have like great documentation. And actually, you know what? I'm going to quickly go on their site, their GitHub, and show you just how many, like the sheer volume of examples they have. So let's go Next.js, GitHub. And if we just flick through the examples here, there is examples for every possible use case you could ever want. You've got it with Apollo, you've got it with ReasonML, and some, I mean, like, what is Tailwind CSS? I've never heard of that. Like, so many, it's like very exotic almost, how many different examples they have. So back to where I was. I think Dan Abramov of Facebook, he once tweeted that his friend uses Next.js and that his friend likes it. So, I mean, I take that as like a glowing recommendation, if anything, if that's anything to go by. And yeah, like most of all, it just makes your site feel really fast. Thanks again for watching, guys.